Welcome back to the Startup Showdown podcast, where we discuss pitching, funding, and scaling startups. Join us as we interview winners, mentors, and judges of the monthly $120,000 pitch competition powered by Panoramic Ventures. We also discuss the latest updates in software, Web3, healthcare tech, fintech, and more. Now sit tight as we interview this week's guest and their journey through entrepreneurship.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Startup Showdown, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get into it, it's important to recognize our sponsor, Panoramic Ventures. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on Startup Showdown, we have Matt Schmidt with Peoplelogic. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Peoplelogic. How are you serving folks?
Yeah, fantastic. Great question. So Peoplelogic is all about helping make companies' organizational health be simple enough to be actionable. And when we talk about organizational health, we're talking about all the messy things around your people and your processes, helping you predict attrition and burnout and where you've got people working on things that don't necessarily move the business forward and help you strategically plan and all those fun things that help businesses grow more effectively.
So if they don't have Peoplelogic, how are they going about that right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually they're getting surprised when their best people are leaving, or when they find out that somebody they thought was a high performer was not being as effective as they thought they could be. And if they're doing strategic planning, they're usually taking a best guess and using their expertise and their gut feelings around the things that they're doing. A lot of companies are relying on surveys and those types of things, but we found that our customers tend to be more data driven than that, and see all the pretty well known problems that exist within beating your team over the head with more surveys.
So how does it work? Like, where are you gleaning the information? Where are you getting the data so you can make these informed decisions and assessments?
Yeah, so we connect right to the tools that your team spend their day using, right? So it's your Zooms, your Salesforces, your HubSpots, your Jiras, your GitHubs. And we're just consuming the exhaust data from those tools, the things that are left on the floor from the usage, without getting into the specific details and content of those things. We're able to glean really useful insights about how your teams are interacting and where there's potential risks to the business.
So from looking at those kind of breadcrumbs, you're able to see, hey, Bill is, we think Bill's a top performer, but maybe it's Mary who's really the top performer.
That's certainly one of the insights. One of the more common things that we also see is, where you thought that a team was actually distributing the work across the entire team, but really you've got somebody that's standing there at the bottom of an inverted pyramid holding everybody up, right? That they're doing all the work or an outsized amount of work, which puts them really at a risk for burning out, and for feeling like they're carrying more of the team than everybody else, which can lead to a toxic culture as well.
And the other side of that is that somebody might be kind of a gatekeeper that maybe you don't want them to be a gatekeeper. Exactly.
There's very often, as organizations scale, you get somebody who, was the person that everything had to go through when you were 10 people or 25 people. But as you get to 50 people, that person still being that bottleneck is no longer effective. It doesn't help the business. And so you sometimes forget that those things are still in place because organizations move so fast that you don't pay attention to it until it's too late.
Now, is this the solution like a nice to have for smaller organizations, but as you get to X number of employees, it becomes a must have?
Yeah, that's what we start to see it as. You start to become a growth company, moving from a startup to a scale up. As you go past 50 people into 75, 100, and up to probably 1,000 or so, it becomes much more of a need to a must have, right? As you get bigger than that, then we begin to see a breakdown into the individual departments and the teams and those sorts of things that operate much more like companies. And, then people begin to use us for things for, understanding a baseline for changes that they want to make, or for doing planning around whether they have enough of the right kinds of people to do the work that they want to do. Those types of things. It becomes, bigger, more hairier problems as you get bigger.
Now, in your career, you've worked on several startups and scaled several businesses. Were they always in this space?
No, this is my first one in what, I think now it's safe to call it HR tech, future of work. My last business was DZone, now Devada, and AnswerHub, and we were in the developer engagement, developer community space. And so very different, but, at the end of the day, how businesses grow and how they run have a lot of similarities. And so, you're able to apply your learnings from one into the next.
Now, at the beginning of your career, were you always on an entrepreneurial track, or did you work for large organizations and then kind of pivot to startups and more entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I think I started my first business when I was 12 or 13, doing web development, back before everybody had the internet, and you could, remember where to go on the internet by, remembering the domain, and there were only a handful of them. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And this is, I tend to go all in on my startups. And this, my last one took about 15 years to navigate its way bootstrap to an exit. This one, we're on a very different path, being venture-backed and choosing to go at it much more aggressively.
Now, what was the learning there from, going from bootstrap to exit, now going to venture-backed to hopefully eventual exit?
So I think the biggest learning there was that, when you're bootstrapped, you're very focused on making sure that you're funding everything with the cash flow from adding customers, and that you do need to solve a problem immediately, versus trying to, here we're very much focused on, we see the problem, we understand how to solve the problem, but we're building something that hasn't been done before, and there's intellectual property behind it, and that is we needed the additional funding to be able to really bring that bigger vision to work, right? And so, the big learning, I would say, is that, when you're bootstrapped and when you're somewhat more cash strapped in that way, you make different decisions about the things that you prioritize that maybe don't serve you best for accelerating the business forward. Whereas when you're down this path now, with having raised a small amount of money here at Peoplelogic, we're making choices around, how do we hire the best people for the job to be able to get us to where we're going as quickly as we can, rather
than just hiring the person to solve the problem today.
Yeah, and then what's going to take us into the future, which is what we're looking at now, and aiming for something that is going to have a much larger impact on the business, and so we're very focused on. And the other difference being that when you're funded and you're backed, when you're using other folks' money, you're very focused. You're always thinking about how you're going to build the right relationships that are going to get you to an exit. Right? And when you're bootstrapped and it's your own money, you're not necessarily thinking about that you're going to look for an exit. You're happy when one comes, but that's not ultimately, for most folks, the way that they run their business.
Now, what about from as a CEO, as a leader, the feeling when you're bootstrapped, kind of the buck stops with you, but when you're using other people's money, now you got other people yelling at you?
Well, ultimately with the team, the buck still stops with me. And it's now, not only do I feel an obligation to my team to make sure that, I'm doing everything that I can to clear the roadblocks for them. I'm also, very aware of the obligation that I have to our investors to make sure that we ultimately give them a return on their investment, and that we're incorporating them into the processes where it makes sense with our own business and keeping them updated. And so you really now are beholden to two different groups of stakeholders within the business when you've taken other people's money. And there is a saying that I was used to know, and it was, you spend your money differently when it's other people's money. But the truth is, when it's other people's money, you are actually accountable to them for how you spend it. And so, for me, it's important that we do that in a way that is, conservative and appropriate for what they expected to get out of their investment in us.
Right. And aggressive enough to get to the milestones you need to get to.
Exactly. We are certainly beholden to the model that we put in front of them and our projections for where we expect to get to. That's for sure.
Now, as a leader, is there a mentor or an advisor or somebody that's kind of your true north that you aspire to be? Or is this something that you have just been kind of picking up on your own and, just figuring things out on your own?
Yeah, that's until recently, I was not someone who really took advantage of having coaches and mentors and advisors. Over the past couple of months, I've made a pretty concerted effort to start to incorporate more of those types of people into my world, so that I get different perspectives as I try to figure out how to run the business, and that I have people to turn to when I'm looking to figure out how to solve problems. And so, I have different coaches for the different types of challenges that might come up in my world. Some are, useful for helping me understand, challenges around product market fit and go to market. And others are useful for helping me just understand the day in, day out stressors of being a CEO. And I think, I have begun to see how that, why people turn to those. And I've had some great other CEOs that have leveraged both of my coaches and others to, have them be able to tell me the value that they've seen from working with people like that, and how it's helped them accelerate their business.
So what was the kind of reason for taking that leap into coaching? Did something happen, or was that something that you were like, other people are doing this? Am I missing something that's like right in front of me that I should just be checking out?
That was I probably started down that path in a moment of, self-doubt of whether I was doing the right thing as a CEO. And so, in speaking with some other CEOs and to some of our customers who actually referred me to one of my coaches, they spoke of similar problems and in how that had helped them. So I don't know that there was any one thing other than that I knew that I wanted to be a better CEO and a leader, and that this was a way that had worked for others that were at our stage and place to be able to get there.
Now, what do you think your superpower is as a leader?
That's a great question. I think that typically my superpower is being able to see around corners and to see the whole picture. That tends to be where I add the most value, and which gives me a different perspective than the rest of the team has in being able to understand where we need to make changes and do that in a way that's not going to just disrupt the entire organization.
Now, any advice for other founders out there on building that team of A players, the team of people that can kind of take your vision and make it real?
Yeah, I think you can't stress enough how important it is to have A players on the team and to go and get the best players that you can. I'm a sole founder here at Peoplelogic, but the people that I've put around me on the executive team are people that I've known forever and who have been, important into the growth of Peoplelogic. And so, if you're going to have a much harder time if you don't figure out one way or another how to get those A players in at the moment where they can have an impact. It may stretch your exit or the ability to get another round of funding by months or years if you don't bring those people in at the right time. So my advice is definitely, one way or another, figure out how to bring those people in to get them to buy into your vision and get them to help you make it real.
So it sounds like you're saying that those are must-haves, not nice-to-haves.
I have come to the position that having those A players, particularly around you on your senior leadership team, it's a must-have.
Now, how did you hear about Startup Showdown and Panoramic Ventures?
Oh gosh, it's been a couple of months. I think in this case, I think I was, there was an outreach from Panoramic Ventures. We were in the middle of raising our pre-seed round, and I think they invited us in to fill out the application, and we went through the process and went through the first stage and the second stage, and then we were eventually selected as a finalist and got to present on the stage, which was fortunate that they had moved back to being in person, and it was in Charlotte here, where we're based in Durham, North Carolina, and so we were able to go and be in person and present as a finalist for their second ever event, I think.
Was there any aspect of the process that was most beneficial, or that you felt like, oh, that was a good use of our time?
Just getting to basically, the first couple of stages of it are really basically lightning pitches, 2 to 5 minutes, getting to do it over and over again. And that part was super helpful. After that, being a finalist, getting to see the other founders and hear how they talked about it, and hear that they were having the same challenges and being in the same stage, that part was also super helpful. The actual presenting in person in front of other people was entirely too nerve-wracking, particularly after having been virtual for the last 2 years, right?
Right.
So, suddenly going back and being in person and presenting and doing your pitch and walking on a stage, and you forget how different that is from just being ahead on a Zoom screen.
Yeah, I think we're all relearning that nowadays. We're all relearning that in real life experience. Exactly.
Your real life social skills of having to get dressed and put shoes on and actually interact with people is something you have to relearn. So, but the act of, I was appreciative that they, pushed for that in person and were able to do that in such a way that we were able to get out and pitch to an audience, and really got some really great feedback, even though we didn't win.
So what's next for Peoplelogic? How can we help?
Yeah, the next, we've just finished our first round here of funding, and we're really very focused on adding new customers and growing the business. And that's, getting that revenue in the door is really the thing that we're most focused on now. We've got a great team in place, and now if there's companies that have the problems that we solve around attrition and burnout and ineffective processes, we're here to help and always looking to find ways to work with great companies. And
those companies are 50 plus people with that are growing rapidly?
Yep, 50 plus, growing rapidly, usually in the tech space.
And then what are some symptoms that they might have a problem that you can solve?
Yeah, usually, they're worried that they're going to lose team members, or they're starting to hear people talk about burnout. Those tend to be 2 quick signs that they need to do something.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your story today. If somebody wants to connect with you or learn more about Peoplelogic, what's the website? Yeah, it's peoplelogic.ai. And you can also reach me at matt@peoplelogic.ai. All right. Well, thank you again for sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you. Thanks so much, Lee. I appreciate it. All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Startup Showdown.
As always, thanks for joining us, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Startup Showdown podcast so you get the latest episode as it drops wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more and apply to our next Startup Showdown pitch competition, visit showdown.vc. That's showdown.vc. All right, that's all for this week. Goodbye for now.